Hello. Welcome to One in Four You Are Not Alone podcast powered by Oklahoma's nonprofit Kids Joining Eternity. Some of the content you listen to you may find to be graphic or uncomfortable, but we feel that in sharing our stories, we will provide healing and hope for our families and educate the community. I am the host, Jenna Vasquez. I am Poppy Lynn's mother, and today we have Megan Santee. Megan, hey, how are you doing?
Fine. How are you?
Good. And can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yes, my name is Megan Santee, and I am Cooper's mom.
I've gotten to know Megan, it's been 2 years now?
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah, we met for the first time at one of Kids Joining Eternity's support groups. I remember, was that your first day or was that my first day?
I think it was yours.
My first day.
I think you had just moved back to Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah. I remember I dragged my mom there that day and because I was so nervous going in. And what does Melanie say? She says the hardest thing to do is just get there, right?
And walk in the door. That's the hardest part.
You do? Okay. Well, I want to start off because this is, one of our first couple of episodes. And I just think it would be great just to have you tell a little bit about your story from start to beginning, as much as you would like to share and as little as you like to share and however comfortable you feel sharing. But if you can tell our listeners about you and your story.
Sure. So my husband and I decided we wanted to start a family right pretty quick after we got married. He's a little bit older than I am, but we knew we were going to be faced with some challenges to start a family. And unfortunately, after quite some time, we were diagnosed as 1 in 8. So 1 in 8 being 1 in 8 people are struggling with infertility. Ours was unfortunately unexplained, so there was no resolution to say, okay, we're going to do this and this will work. It was just a trial and error process. So we went through medical intervention to try to start a family. And after a few unsuccessful rounds of that, we decided to take a break because that is very stressful and very timing and also very expensive. We chose to start again a few months after the fact, and the fourth time we were successful and found out we were pregnant in, I believe it was May or June of 2016. And from there on, everything was perfect. I made it through the first trimester just fine. And being naive, I thought after that, you didn't have to worry about anything. You made it to that 12-week mark, and then you just held on until week 38, 39, or 40. I had no reason to see a high-risk doctor, so I went through the normal prenatal care. At 32 weeks exactly, I woke up on a Monday morning and just wasn't feeling great. No particular reason. And I had noticed he had kind of slowed down in his movements, but every time I was about to make that phone call or head to the hospital, he would move. And so I just felt that reassurance of, okay, you're just being a little toot, like we like to say, and just being difficult.
Yeah.
But I went ahead and called my OB's office because I still wasn't feeling great. And they said to go ahead and go into triage just because I was 32 weeks along. And I had mentioned that his movement had decreased. I honestly thought I was just going to be there, get monitored, be told he was fine, and head home. Mm-hmm. So we got to the triage at one of the hospitals here, and immediately everything was fine. Listened to his heartbeat. They did some they gave me some medicine to try to increase his movement, and we could hear him moving on the monitors, but I didn't feel him move. We hadn't told our family that we were there at that point because we didn't think there was a big deal of anything.
Because you're 32 weeks.
I'm 32 weeks. Yeah. And I wasn't feeling good. That was the whole point of me going in. Yeah. I really wasn't worried about him at that point. I was wanting to just feel better and be able to keep food in my stomach.
Yeah.
So the next thing I remember is they ordered an ultrasound just to see what was going on. And of course, the poor ultrasound tech, they can't tell you anything. They're just there to take measurements and pictures, and then they have to give that information back to the radiologist. I knew something wasn't right because she was being pretty quiet and not chatty Cathy. But again, I didn't think anything of it. So my husband and I were discussing. I was like, why don't you go ahead and call the moms and just say, hey, we're here, but everything's fine. We should be going home soon.
Yeah.
And within 10 minutes, our whole world changed. 2 nurses came in, had told us that Cooper's abdomen was measuring full term, and he wasn't quite full term yet, but the rest of his body was where it should be. And so they weren't quite sure why his abdomen was so much larger than the rest of his body. And then due to the fact that he was kind of sluggish, they wanted to get him out immediately. So within minutes, they said, okay, we're going to do an emergency C-section. We're going to get him out. It's going to be the best course of action. And I mean, there was no argument.
And so at that point, were you worrying at all, or were you thinking, okay, everything's still going to be okay?
I was still optimistic because he's 32 weeks. And I personally know families who have had micro preemies who are perfectly healthy today.
Yeah.
And so that didn't cross my mind.
Yeah.
I was thinking, okay, we're going to have a little bit of a NICU stay and probably some breathing issues and maybe a little bit of development delay. But I never, ever thought that I wouldn't be leaving the hospital with my baby. My doctor also was out of town. And so I had a person I never met before delivering my son, which was perfectly fine. But just in the moment, you are extremely emotional and all you want is familiarity. You know, your family there, the doctor that's been seeing you for 5, 6, 7 years there. But the care was fantastic at this hospital. He was born at 1:15 p.m. on Monday, November 28th, 2016. And I was still optimistic. He was born. He cried a little bit. They brought him to me and I was able to kiss him. And the nurses said, okay, we're going to take him to the NICU to get evaluated. And I said, okay, great. So I told my husband to go be with him because I was fine. I was totally fine. The rest of the afternoon's kind of a blur because you're medicated. And
you just delivered a baby.
And I just delivered a baby and had major abdominal surgery.
Yeah.
The NICU doctor had come in and out of my room. And at this point, my husband had come back just because they were letting Cooper rest and still trying to evaluate him. And she told us that he had a 50-50 chance. They still weren't sure what was going on.
50-50 chance as in
surviving.
Is that how they came in and said, like?
Yes, they said they did not know what was going on with him. And they kept questioning me, you know, had you been out of the country? Have you been sick? And I had mentioned how I had had some indigestion and upset stomach, but they were more so focusing on like a infection and thinking maybe something I had passed on to him. But I said, no, I've had a picture perfect pregnancy. I've had no issues. But she said 50-50 chance. And of course, I'm looking at the glass half full and I'm like, okay, you know, he's 32 weeks, like no other issues that we know of. But she recommended that he be transferred to Children's Hospital for further evaluation because that's the best hospital in the area for babies. Yeah. Without a doubt, I said, absolutely, you know, need to take care of him. And I did not realize this, but typically they do not transfer the moms to be with their babies if they get transferred to a different hospital.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that either.
I did not know that. And I am so thankful that the doctor that delivered Cooper, who, again, I'd never met until that day, advocated for me to be transferred inpatient over there as well. Yeah. That way I could be with him. If not, they would have had to discharge me, and they're not going to discharge someone who less than 12 hours ago had major abdominal surgery.
Yeah.
So we both got to take our first ambulance rides. I got to take an ambulance over to Children's.
Were you guys together in the ambulance?
We were not. Cooper actually was meta-flighted, so he got to ride on a helicopter.
Okay. Did your husband get to go on the helicopter with him?
He did not. We asked that question because at the time we were optimistic and didn't think anything was going to happen. And so he's like, can I ride on the helicopter with him? And the paramedics were fantastic. And they're like, no, unfortunately, we're limited for space. There is a, and I don't know the exact words, but like an isolate unit on this helicopter for babies. That way they have everything they would essentially have in the NICU, just on a short-term basis. But
even that fact, like, you know, being separated from him.
Yeah.
Like
it was. All of us were separated from him.
Yeah, within 12 hours.
Yeah, because at that point, he'd always had someone by him, whether it be me or my husband or the moms. But I knew he was in good hands. Yeah. That was never a concern. We get to the hospital. I got to the hospital, and the paramedics had actually gotten my husband's phone number, and they were texting him while they were in flight and just letting him know how Cooper was doing, and that meant the world.
That's great. That's great.
that they were doing that, and everything we had knew, he was doing great. We had gotten to Children's Hospital. They admitted me, and I was in the OB special care ward. So I wasn't around new moms. I was around moms who maybe were on hospital bed rest, or maybe moms who were kind of in a similar situation as I was, where they weren't quite discharged from the hospital yet, but they may have had babies in the NICU or things like that. So it was great, but it was a little bit different atmosphere than being on like a true labor and delivery floor. Yeah. It was really late in the evening, maybe like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Very long day at this point. And I finally get settled in my room, and the paramedic comes in there with my nurse, and yeah, that's it. The paramedics and my nurse, and they said, Mom needs to go up and see him right away. He's not doing good. And so within a matter of 30 minutes, an hour, we're getting information from the paramedic saying he's doing great in flight, to we get to Children's Hospital and he's took a turn for the worse. Wow. Get to the NICU room, and there was probably 5, 6, 7 people working on him, trying to resuscitate him and get all the machines and cords hooked up to him. And it was really hard to see because you're tiny, precious baby. All these people are trying to take care of him, and you can't.
And like you said, just earlier that day, you went to the hospital, not expecting at 10 o'clock at night you'd be in that
exactly
position.
I was not prepared mentally by any means.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm distraught because I'm like, what is going on? I was so optimistic this whole time. Like, why is this happening? And the NICU doctor at Children's said, we're going to run some additional testing. They still didn't know what was causing the distension in his abdomen. And at this time, he had started to swell. So whatever was going on started to increase after he was born.
Wow.
They had instructed us to go to our room and try to get some rest, and they would let us know when they had an update. So we sent our parents home. My husband and I finally, I think, drifted off to sleep about midnight, and then 3 a.m., the NICU doctor comes in to my room, and I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Like trying to comprehend what he's saying, but they were able to determine that Cooper had a tumor that was connected to his kidneys. That was not detected during any prenatal work because I wasn't considered high risk. So there was no need to do any additional ultrasounds or sonograms or any type of blood test. And they tried to do, or they did an ultrasound on him, and that's how they were able to determine that's what it was. They wanted to do a CT scan, but he was too unstable. He had coded a couple times between the midnight hour and 3 a.m. And the NICU doctor pretty much said, come see him. They didn't give us any other option except for comfort care. At that point, your whole world, everything you knew is just, it doesn't seem real. You seem like you're in a dream, like a bad dream, a movie you've watched, and you're thinking, oh, that'll never happen to me. And I just remember wailing, not crying, not screaming, like truly wailing. And picked up the phone and called my mom and excuse me, and called my husband's parents and said, we need you to get here. And I actually couldn't go see Cooper right away because due to my emotional state, my blood pressure was to almost a stroke level. And my nurse just kept pleading with me. She's like, you've got to calm down because I can't let you go up there being in this state.
Yeah.
I think she just kind of gave up and said, okay, you got to go up there.
Yeah.
So she let me go up there, and
you're like, what other state can I be in? Yeah. Like, this is my baby.
It's like, unless you sedate me, my blood pressure is probably going to stay pretty high.
Yeah.
So we go up to the NICU room. He was in a room by himself, which I'm so thankful for. And not that I would have cared otherwise, but the fact that we got some personal time with him really meant a lot. But, the baby I saw there was not the baby that I delivered because he did not look the same. He had continued to swell more. I just remember his little ears were so puffy, so precious, but so puffy. And I just knew he was in pain. And they assured me that he was not in pain. They were making sure he was comfortable, but I didn't want him to suffer. The nurses were fantastic. I didn't have the best experience with the NICU doctor there, but he almost questioned our decision to take him off of any medical devices. And so that was a battle. And
Like, you guys wanted to take him off, or you didn't want to take him off?
the options we were provided was comfort care. So meaning that they just keep him comfortable until the point where they can no longer resuscitate him. And just thinking of how many times he had crashed during the midnight to 3 a.m. hour, and all the trauma to his little body, just them him having to go through that anymore. So, and at this point, I still hadn't got to hold my baby, and that was so important to me because I wanted to hold him in my arms. And in order for me to hold him, he would have had to be removed from all the machines. So my husband and I talked about it, and without a doubt, we knew that we both wanted to be able to hold him and spend some time with him. And so we had instructed that that was our decision. And the NICU doctor questioned us and made us feel like horrible parents. But when you're put in that moment, you don't want to see your child suffer any more than they already are. So it's the hardest decision I've ever made in my life. And I hope no one ever has to make that decision again. But unfortunately, I know they will.
Yeah.
The nurses were great. They helped us understand what would happen. And we were able to get the support from other doctors. And again, this is like 4 a.m. But we took him off the machines, and I finally got to hold him. And he passed away in my arms, and I wouldn't have wanted it at that time any other way.
Yeah.
After that, the rest of my hospital stay was a blur.
Did you keep him after he passed away?
I minutes, but I think it was probably an hour, maybe 2. And my husband held it
After he passed away?
And I don't believe our parents held him, which is something I would have asked to do with him, but
They come and see him after he passed away, or
our parents were there
okay
during everything.
Okay.
So Cooper got to be surrounded by his grandma and grandpas and his mommy and daddy. So
did the nurse come in? Did you let the nurse know when you were ready, or?
Yes, and they were with us too. And they were really, really good nurses.
And then how long did you stay in the hospital after?
Well, because I had elevated blood pressure, and I think rightfully so, given to the experience we had just gone through. I was in the hospital for 5 days, which was really long 5 days.
Yeah, and just probably being in the room where all that took place, and just being in the hospital where it took place, were you wanting to get out of there as fast as you could?
Yes and no.
Or were you wanting to stay because that's where he was?
I think looking back, that's probably I was kind of happy that I stayed for 5 days because it allowed me to grieve there, like in some of the most raw emotional times. But I also had distractions because for anyone who's ever had to be admitted to the hospital and stay, you know that there's constantly nurses coming in and out of your room. There's doctors coming in and out of your room. We had the pastoral services constantly coming in and out of our room. So, in the midst of this grieving, this hysterical crying, you had someone in there that felt, I'm sure, extremely uncomfortable being in there, but they also had a job to do. So that kind of broke up some of the hysteria. But going home was really hard too.
So when you left the hospital, did you leave in a wheelchair? And what was take me to that feeling of leaving without Cooper in your arms?
I felt like I was a zombie, to be honest. Your body has gone through the process of growing a child. Your body doesn't know that you've lost a child. So you still have all that postpartum healing that you have to do. And I had major abdominal surgery that I wasn't prepared for. And so physically you're in so much pain and uncomfortable. But then you're also dealing with your uterus trying to go back to size,
Just like any other
just like
woman.
any other woman. And then one of the hardest things that I had to deal with was your breast getting filled with milk to
Yeah.
feed a baby, and it's a baby that you don't have.
Yeah.
And it was just a constant reminder of he was here, but he's not.
Yeah. No, I remember after Poppy passed, like the breastfeeding part, because I love breastfeeding Noah, and I looked for that's what I was looking forward to the most, and that was hard. I remember I donated some milk because I was like, what am I going to do with this since
Yep. And actually, before I left the hospital, I had a really great nurse come in. She wasn't my nurse, but she had been through a similar situation, with the exception that her and her husband knew that their daughter was not going to survive past birth. So she was an advocate for the Oklahoma Mother's Milk Bank, and said that she had pumped and donated for quite some time. And she really changed my heart with that, because at that point, 4 or 5 days postpartum, 4 days after losing my son, I knew that I could try to do something good out of a horrible situation. And so I got the hospital grade pump and started pumping in the hospital, and then frantically trying to get a pump to take home, because I hadn't planned for all of that at this point. I was waiting until he was born to do all that, expecting to take a baby home. But my husband was so supportive of it. And I mean, I pumped around the clock just like I had a newborn at home. And as
that's
crazy as it sounds, it's therapeutic.
It is. It was therapeutic. I remember it being therapeutic to do the same thing.
So I chose to do that for about 6 weeks, just to kind of get that initial expression out. And part of the healing process for me personally. And then I remember it was New Year's Eve, and I said, okay, I think I'm done, because it is a lot. And for any mother who has chose to breastfeed and pump, I mean, it's a lot of work. It's not just pumping being done. I mean, there's parts that you have to wash. Yeah. You have to worry about storing, and then, your body lets you know when it's time to pump again.
So take me to like couple months or weeks after his delivery. What was that time like?
Dark. You're still not cleared to go back to work, which at that point I didn't even know if I wanted to do that. Life is not going to be the same. You have this plan that you and your family, you and your friends make of, okay, I'm working, we're going to have a child, and then this and that and the other, and everything that you had hoped and planned for is gone, and you just don't know how to move on. And that's where I had asked, actually, in the hospital, for some type of support.
So you had to ask for it?
I had asked for it, and they were great, but the resources available were really limited. They offered the psychology department to see a psychiatrist, and for me personally, I didn't feel like that was the best avenue. And then they also offered pastoral services, which we did talk to a few of the pastors that were there volunteering, but I knew long term it wasn't something that was going to help me move forward with this.
And so what finally, do you remember the day where the sun kind of seemed to come out a little bit more than, like, what was that made you feel that you could move a couple steps forward?
It's really hard to pinpoint it. I don't remember a lot from my postpartum healing at home after my husband had to go back to work.
And I always wonder, like, I think, after women lose a child, have a miscarriage, you're going through, you're changing your body along with emotional. So sometimes it's hard to determine, is it the postpartum that you would have had if Cooper was here?
Yep.
or is it all like
grief.
the
Yeah.
grief? And so like you're dealing with it all, and then once you can start moving a step forward, is it because that the grief has, you've been able to process it, or is it because now you're out of the baby blues or the postpartum?
It's hard to say.
It
Really is, and I think it'd be interesting to see if there's any studies kind of been done on that. I was asked about the postpartum, like, well, I don't know, like I'm dealing with grief right now, and the trauma from that, so I don't know if this is postpartum blues or postpartum depression.
I feel like sometimes women, after they've gone through such a traumatic experience, with labor and delivery, that sometimes we're pushed to move on faster than if we were to actually have our babies here. Like there's more understanding for us to go through postpartum when our babies are actually here. And when they're not, it's okay, get up, you get on your feet, let's go, let's be happy again. But we're still going through this. Yeah. We're still going through the same things. They're just not in our arms.
Yes.
So, did you find that, like, did people try to like, okay, try to get you to move on a little, like get up and get, cheery a little bit more faster than?
I think so. But I also think it's because people just don't know how to react and handle it. And I mean, they know it's an awful situation, but they don't know what to say, to do, or comfort you. And I think we'll maybe touch base on this later, but just some of the things that people say that are not malicious and not ill intent, but they do hurt. So I did experience some of those things. It's just really hard to pinpoint at what point afterwards where the good started to outweigh the bad. You still grieve and you still think about them every single day, but the crying was a little bit less. You'd still cry, but instead of it being all day, you'd maybe only have a couple minutes of where you're just overwhelmed and you need to get those tears out. And I think trying to get back in the swing of a routine, even though it wasn't the same routine as being pregnant or even before, just trying to get a little sense of a new normalcy helped get me through some of the darkest times.
Did you ever feel guilty, like the first time, like maybe you and your husband went out on a date or went to go try and do something fun?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that too. We had first time seeing a lot of the big group of friends of ours. We had gone to Top Golf, and it was the first time I enjoyed an adult beverage in close to a year. And so in the moment, I'm enjoying myself, and it's nice to see friends and have those day-to-day conversations that we had before. And then afterwards, you're just like, why are you happy? You just lost a child.
Yeah, that's what you feel like everyone's thinking, looking at you. And it's because you have to have this enjoyable time and feel like you can't talk about that side of you. So you're with your friends, you have to put on this fun face, you have to, and in the back of your mind, you're like, I want to talk about him. Like, because if he was in your arms here, you would be talking about
what
him.
is he doing?
Yeah. And just like any other mom. So that feeling, it's very relatable.
So I had asked for support and couldn't find that support that I was looking for. I did personally reach out to a counselor just to talk some things and saw them for quite some time. But a really good friend of mine works for the high-risk doctor here in Oklahoma City, the perinatal center. And due to the pregnancies that they do see, some of them they know or are very certain that the pregnancy, the child will not survive. So they have resources available. And she actually reached out to me and said, hey, a girl that I know has information about this group. I'm going to send them your information if that's okay. And I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I got my care package in the mail, and it had a book and had a little stuffed animal and just a little insert about what Kids Joining Eternity does. And was like,
okay. So that's how you got involved.
That is how I got involved. And I'm so thankful. And it was maybe 6 weeks postpartum. So I'm still trying to recover. And I went to my first study group, and I was terrified because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? You're opening yourself up to.
I didn't realize you went that early to your
Yeah.
first. Wow.
Yeah. I felt like I needed to because I needed to talk about it.
Yeah.
And like you had mentioned, you want to talk about those things with your friends, but you don't want to make them uncomfortable, but you also don't want them to think, oh, here we go again. She's talking about, the baby that she just lost. And so I was wanting that open forum to talk about how I was feeling and how I was doing that week and just to see what other moms, families are going through. So I walked into those doors in January of 2017 and haven't walked out. So
Yeah, it's been a great thing.
yeah.
What has been your most memorable moment of Kids Joining Eternity? How what have they done for you to help you in the healing process the most?
Networking, but in a sense of connecting with other families who have gone through a loss as well. And one thing I've learned is there's so many various stages of loss as far as the immediate raw, you're still deep in the trenches in that really dark time to, maybe 3 or 6 months out where you're still trying to learn how to go forward with this. It's not moving on, it's just going forward with it. And then even for those who maybe have had other children, talking with them, because at that point we didn't have any other children and that's something we knew we wanted, but I didn't know how to go forward with that. So having some of those families there to talk through those things, and then seeing the families that are, 5, 10 years past the loss and seeing how they were able to move forward with their lives and still see what they can do to honor their children, but still know that you can still have that joy again.
So you mentioned wanting kids, still wanting to have kids. How soon after Cooper do you think you realized that, or did you?
Pretty quickly, because I had an empty heart and an empty arms. And I knew that I had lots of love to give more children. But knowing what my husband had gone through, I was honestly very hopeless about it and just thought, oh my gosh, we're going to have to go through another journey of trying to get pregnant. And we lost Cooper in November of 2016. And we found out, huge surprise, we were pregnant in February of 2017 with Cooper's little sister. So that in itself is a whole nother journey of going through pregnancy after you've lost a child.
Tell me about that pregnancy.
Terrifying. You've completely lost your naiveness of getting past that first trimester and everything being great. You're constantly worried. It's you almost feel guilty for getting excited, because then that guilt sets in of you lost a child and you lost a child less than a year ago. What are you doing? It took a long time for me to do something simple as registering, setting up her nursery, getting some of those things that moms who haven't had a loss are so excited to do and want to do as quick as they can. I held off as long as I could to do those things because the pessimist in me said, something's going to happen to her too. But then the optimist in me is like, no, God's got a plan. You'll bring her home. So Lucy was born almost 11 months exactly after we lost Cooper.
Tell me about Lucy.
She's fun. She's a sassy
She's
little
so cute.
girl. She's fun and she's sassy. And, you look at her and I'd always wonder, what Cooper's personality would have been like and what type of relationship they would have had. And then who knows if Lucy would even be here without us losing Cooper, because, they're really close in age, really close in age. But going through the first year and trying to get through all those holidays and milestones, and then also being pregnant, that was extremely hard because your emotions are just everywhere.
So do you talk to Lucy about Cooper?
Yes, we let her know that she has a big brother. We also were able to get a Molly Bear made, and that sits in her room.
What is a Molly Bear King?
A Molly Bear is a bear that this nonprofit, that's what their mission is. They make these bears, and you can provide them the information about your child if you know it, as far as like weight. And then they personalize them with whatever you would like on them, whether it be maybe a scripture, averse sports, or if there's some type of insignia like an animal, they will try to incorporate that. But I believe the founder of Molly Bears, I think she lost her little girl. I don't know at what point in pregnancy or if it was early infant loss, but I believe her name was Molly, and they started it, and it's a national organization, and they only take 100 applications each month. And I believe ours took 6 or 7 months to get our bear back. But what's even more special is a woman here locally made my Cooper bear and got to deliver him
really
to like face to face, and I got to hear her brief story, and why she's doing that is because she also lost her son. So that was her way of making good out of a horrible situation.
I also have a bear for Poppy. I'm not sure if it's the Molly bear itself. I don't even know how I came across it. Like, it was just like right after I had lost her, and it's the size that she was, length and weight. And then I also have another bear with her heartbeat in it that the nurses did while she was alive. Did you get anything from did the hospital leave?
I did, and I'm so thankful, because at the time you just don't think about those things. And the
fact that they're prepared for that shows that
it's horrible that
common
stuff happens all the time. They let me back up. So the first hospital he was at, the NICU nurses took some pictures of him there. Wow. So he still had some tubes and everything. And there's some pictures of the family with him. And this is before we held him. So we were just oohing and cooing over him in his little isolette. And then after he had passed at Children's Hospital, those nurses also dressed him up, put him in some clothes, and took pictures of him. And then they also did some handprints and footprints, and they gave everything to us in a little box. And I still keep that, but it's precious. And I'm just so glad they did that, because that was the last thing on my mind, was to take pictures of him and to keep those mementos.
So Lucy is how old now?
She will be 18 months, so almost a year and a half.
So what has this last couple of months and looking forward been like?
We are in a really good place, and it's hard to believe that, because after it happens, you just don't know how you are going to move forward with your life. And my husband is extremely supportive, but I've, let it be known that I want to do something for the greater good. And that's my hope with Kids Joining Eternity, is to continue to spread the word and let families know that there are people who have been in your shoes, and there are people who are here to help you get through some of those darkest times, and there's resources available.
Tell the listeners, so Megan and myself recently have joined the Kids Joining Eternity board. And what are you doing for Kids Joining Eternity right now?
So I was asked to be on the board, and I gladly accepted, because I knew in my heart I wanted to.
Megan's the finance girl with numbers.
I like numbers. I knew I wanted to serve, and just with time, I work full time.
My mom could do numbers. Yes. That's the best way. Go do those numbers, Mom.
With working full time, having a little girl, and just needing to keep up with your life, it's hard to find that extra time. So I'd been praying about wanting to serve and just getting an opportunity. And then Melanie reached out and said, "Hey, we're looking to add some new board members." And I was like, yes.
She also reached out to me, and I have a hard time saying no. So I was like, yes.
Yes. This is exactly what I wanted to do. And so it's been a really exciting start. We're really looking to spread our wings, if you would, and just taking off more, and not just being those resources for when people know that they've lost a child, and word of mouth, and some of the hospitals provide some of the pamphlets, but being more visible in the community. And we have a partnership with Remington Park for the next 2 years. And
you have an event coming up at Remington.
We have an event coming up, but just being there, and being out in the community. Our event at Remington Park, I'm also helping get off the ground, is their extreme animal racing. It's at the end of this month. It's Sunday, April 28th. And they will also race horses, but they will have zebras and ostriches and pigs.
Because someone looks at a random animal and is like, I need to race that.
Yes, yes. And they have some hilarious pictures. I never thought someone could ride an ostrich, but they do. They do. So Kids Joining Eternity, as well as some other Oklahoma nonprofits, have partnered with Remington Park, and we will have a booth there, and we'll be selling some items. This is completely free to the public. Free parking, free admission, and it's a big family-friendly event. So I encourage anyone to come out. I believe it starts at 1:30 on Sunday the 28th.
Are we keeping the items a surprise, or do we know what items we're going to be selling?
Our main one, we're going to do a photo booth.
Everyone loves photos.
Details to come. And then also we will be selling homemade cookies, royal icing sugar cookies.
Because Megan also has a cookie business.
Yeah, just because I knew I needed to put more on my plate. I wanted to start, making
and I told her
cookies.
I'll help out. I'll help lick the bowls if she ever needs someone.
Yes. Yes. You and Clay both.
Yeah, that Remington Park thing's going to be fun.
I'm excited for it, especially because the weather's starting to get nicer. So.
Yeah, it might be really... I went a couple years ago, and I remember it being super hot. So if it's warm that day, guys, bring sunscreen.
Well, thankfully, the nonprofit tables will be inside, so you can come see us.
Yeah, so at least just come for that.
Just come for that.
And, okay, so Remington Park, April 28th. And don't you do something for Easter?
We do. Some really near and dear friends of mine, a couple months after we had lost Cooper, had approached me and said, hey, we're wanting to do something to honor Cooper, but of course we want your blessing before we go forward. And I said, sure. They wanted to do Easter baskets. Holidays, especially the Christmas holiday. I know when families are in the hospital and have to spend their time there, a lot of volunteers or organizations will provide various items for them just to know that, hey, you're thought about during the holiday season. I'd never really heard of any other holiday being recognized, and so they wanted to highlight Easter. So our first year, we were able to get donations just from family and friends, and we put together about 45 Easter baskets. Which was great. I was super excited. We include a little board book about the story of Easter, and we include various snacks and things just because we all know our vending machine food and sometimes hospital food can just get kind of
old.
And that year we delivered them to the Mercy NICU because that's where Cooper was born. That was extremely hard going back, but we did that year. And then that was 2017. And then 2018, we decided we wanted to carry on the tradition and do Easter baskets again. And that year we wanted to donate to OU Children's because that's where Cooper spent his last hours. And with the donations received, we made 95 baskets.
Wow.
So that was incredible. We were running out of baskets. We had so much goodies and we didn't have enough baskets. Like I was scrambling trying to find those Easter baskets my mom had made for me years ago and I just threw up in the closet. I was like pulling them down and trying to fill them. But it took 2 or 3 carloads because you have to be careful with how you pack them. So we're doing that this year and looking to hopefully drop them off next weekend. And I don't have a amount yet as far as how many Easter baskets, but I'm hoping we can still provide quite a bit.
And Lucy should be able to help you deliver them.
I hope so. Her little silly self will probably be trying to get the candy and snacks out of the Easter baskets. But I'm hoping that's something she will take interest in when she does get older and know that this is something we do in honor of her big brother. Yeah,
and even, years from now when you guys aren't here, hopefully she'll still be doing that with her family. It's something that she can carry on. And I think that's just incredible. Because we know that even with advances in medicine, there's always still going to be families in the NICU. So before we end this, and you have done such a great job. You made this really easy. I was like, wow, she's really good. What is something that you want everyone to know? If you could just get the word out there, if you could just educate, or you could just break down the walls, what would it be? We love to talk about our babies, whether they're babies that we have here with us or babies that have gone too soon. We will gladly talk about them. And that stigma of don't bring it up because it's going to upset her,
is exactly what it is. It's a stigma. The fact that people don't talk about your child hurts even worse, because if they knew you were expecting, and regardless of what point you lost that child, it hurts because they were so excited and ready for you to have this child. But when you lose them, they don't know what to say. So just bring it up. Ask people how they're doing. Do not be afraid to reach out. And then for families who have gone through this, or unfortunately, if you do have to go through a loss of this nature in the future, just know that there are resources available and people who will gladly talk to you and let you share your story, and just be there.
Well, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad we got this started.
I know. I'm glad we were able to start with laughs, and then we had some tears, and then end it with laughs, and then I'm the only thing I'm just kind of sad about is that you didn't bring cookies after we talked about cookies.
I'm sorry.
And you'll know.
You'll just have to come to Remington Park, Jenna. Okay.
I will. Okay. Well, thank you guys for listening, and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram, and you can get more information about Oklahoma's nonprofit Kids Joining Eternity. And we just are here to support you guys, and we just thank you guys for the willingness to break down this wall, and we just hope you guys have a great day.